You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. This week's guests will help us discover the power of a hashtag. Yes, a hashtag. And the power of the right quotation at the right time, if and when you can find it, and the power in a great biography of a great woman. Power is plural, always better than power singular, and also less corruptible, eh? But first, before the powers, we need to look inside the headlines. We have two different headlines we have to sneak inside of this week. The first is about the continuing story of George Will, the conservative commentator you remember, who wrote a column for the Washington Post about the, quote, supposed campus epidemic of rape and the way in which victimhood served as a, quote, coveted status that confers privileges. And the reaction to that, which was pretty red hot. Well, one of the newspapers in the Washington Post syndication circle, who carried George Will, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, has fired him, is not carrying the column, has dumped it. The backlash was so strong against the Will column, and it came from readers all across St. Louis. The man who is the editor of the op-ed page where the column ran, his name is Messenger, aptly named, was quoted as saying, women readers in particular, many of them were offended, and that George Will, he said, had lost a little bit of speed on his fastball. Don't you just love those sports analogies? George Will said there would be no retraction, and he had no regrets. The Washington Post News Media Services, which runs the syndicate, did not apologize. They said that they had discussion about it with George, and he knew what he wanted to say. And Alan Shearer, who is the editorial director of Washington Post News Media Services, when asked were there any women in the group that reviewed Will's piece, he said on that day there were 3 males, if that's important to you. And one blog columnist, Eric Wemple, wrote, yes, it is indeed important because women are the predominant victims of rape and sexual assault. And he goes on to quote a study by the Women's Media Center showing that women staffers at newspapers are outnumbered. Then, in Morocco, the Prime Minister, Abdullah Ben-Kirane, told Parliament last week that women would be better off at home than in the workplace. Did you not know that? He said, today there's a problem with women's role in modern society. Women don't even find time to get married, to be mothers, or to educate their children. Why don't we embrace this sacred status that God gave to women? Notice the we. It reminds me of that old joke that Tonto and the Lone Ranger are in trouble, and the bandits are coming across the hill, and the Lone Ranger says to Tonto, they're coming, Tonto, we've got to get out of here. And Tonto turns to him and says, what you mean we, white boy? Well, the reaction to the Prime Minister's statement was considerable. Political rivals came at him and said that his comments revealed the true agenda of his conservative Islamist party, the Justice and Development Party. Women said the same thing. This is a threat, said Khadija Ruisi. She's a member of Parliament. She said it was an insult to all Moroccan women and all the fights we have waged for many years. We must mobilize against this. Her party, in the opposition, is called the Authenticity and Modernity Party. I must say that Moroccans have very interesting, ornate names for their political parties. What he is defending, said a political science researcher who's quoted in a New York Times article, what Ben Kirane defending, family values, complementary roles instead of equality, is in line with what most Moroccans think. And then he adds, it can also be argued that he's using language feminists use internationally, which is that taking care of a household should be considered work and valued. Well, it's not the same thing, what feminists say internationally and what he is saying. At all. Can we tell the difference? No. Then why are we a political science researcher at the University of California in Berkeley, Mr. Youssef Belal? In any event, in January, Parliament had amended a law to eliminate a loophole that allowed rapists to walk free if they married their victims. So his party, the Islamists, have been careful to keep their ideology under wraps, but many still fear that that party, which strongly opposed revisions to the family code in 2004, these would have been revisions that gave women more rights of marriage and divorce, still will, the first chance they get, roll back women's rights and women's gains in the labor force. And certainly statements like his don't allay the fears. And now for our first guest. Suey Park is a 23-year-old Korean-American freelance writer and the organizer behind #NotYourAsianSidekick, which uses a hashtag as a revolutionary tool. Welcome, Suey, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks for having me, Robin.
Well, you are something else with a capital E. There you were. You've written that you were feeling very down. You'd had knee surgery. You were the only Asian American in your sort of cohort at school, or you'd started graduate school. It sounded pretty damn lonely. And one day you'd had it, and you started this hashtag. It's a hashtag as a revolutionary tool. It was brilliant. Tell how #NotYourAsianSidekick came, how you gave birth to it.
Well, like you said, it was kind of culminating for a long time. I had all of these experiences in which I was like the token model minority, and I was expected to present racial issues in a really, respectable way, in ways that were accessible and consumable for white folks. And as I went through my college experience, I very much felt like we were definitely the wedge group, and that it was really important to focus on how Asian Americans are, supposed to be in solidarity with people of color, and otherwise we can really be used as a weapon against racial justice. So just thinking about mobilizing Asian Americans was one thing, but when I saw how people were using Twitter, I became really interested in how to use it in order to base build and kind of broaden the conversation from my physical location to really make it like a big worldwide thing. So I saw the hashtag Solidarity for White Women by Nikki Kendall, and I just loved that hashtag so much. It was really critiquing white feminism, and women of color were all using their own voices to speak up. But one thing I didn't really like was that after that hashtag, there were a couple articles written by Asian Americans that said, why aren't Asian Americans included as women of color? Why are we always left behind? And so there's this accusation that we're not just left behind by white feminism, but also by women of color feminism, as if these black feminists are these gatekeepers for the women of color feminist collective. And that certainly isn't true. And so I thought, maybe we need our own space, because no one will ever give us a space to have these conversations, to develop some sort of racial identity formation in ourselves before stepping out and going further into activism. And we certainly did that when we created the hashtag to hold our conversation.
And so when you started the hashtag, you were surprised at the reaction being so enormous, though, yes?
Yes, I definitely was. I mean, I thought I could control the conversation. I had a series of topics lined up, everything from immigration reform to, eating disorders. And I thought, every 30 minutes or so, I would throw another discussion question out there. But within the first 30 minutes itself, it became trending as the number one hashtag. And it continued to trend for 36 hours in all different countries. And so it really spiraled out of control. And I think that's okay. I think that sometimes if you love a hashtag, you have to let it free. And you know, I think a lot of times people really just had to vent and get out all of these feelings of frustration. It was multiple Asian women that were just telling all of their experiences of racialization. And I thought that was really beautiful. And I think now that we cleared that air, we can move on to saying, what are we then? Which is a much harder question to ask.
But how brilliant, because of course you're absolutely right. It's a double whammy, isn't it? I mean, the just anger at being oppressed, not only as a woman, but as a woman of color, that other women of color seem to feel finally freer than they used to express, is even that is denied to the, quote, model minority, to the China doll, to the good oppressed woman of color, and it's absolutely maddening. Right. I've even wondered. I know that the phrase of art is Asian American and Pacific Islander, AAPI, and I've often thought about that as a European American myself. I've thought, there's something. I understand the reasons for that, but there's something really crazy about that, because that is covering the majority of human beings on the planet. That is. Yes, no, seriously, it really is. And that is the difference between somebody who is a Sri Lankan and somebody who is from Samoa and somebody who is from Korea and somebody who is, who is Japanese, or it's the biggest glom together I have ever encountered. I wish there could be some more nuance about that.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part, is that we're such a big group if you put all of that together, right? 19 million. And then on top of it, we create this sort of monolith. And I think people think that Asian American as an identity category is this really homogenous existence. But that's not true. Originally, the term Asian American was created as a political term in order to create unity and Pan-Asian solidarity. And I think so often, like we talked about earlier, we're so busy fighting patriarchy and fighting whiteness that we don't really look inside at our internal issues among Asian Americans and how we're very different and how we have different experiences and how we don't need these, representatives to represent us in ways that are really just restrictive.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited to kind of see that rupture starting to happen.
Yeah, and there's such irony about this as well, because you've been quoted as saying that first people were ignoring you or seeing you as an Asian American woman as either invisible or model or sort of someone to be patronized. But then after the hashtag took off, this is a quote of yours that I've read, tell me if it's true, immediately I've become the cool Asian friend. And all of my Facebook friends who thought I was really annoying for talking about racism, and my feelings and my eating disorder, are somehow now tokenizing me as a successful Asian American woman. I mean, how token is that?
How about that?
How about that? This is, you can't win for losing.
No, and I think it's this want, right, of these visible representatives. And so whenever an Asian American speaks up, it's like, yes, but we don't want you to say what you've been saying. We want you to kind of use your platform to boost XYZ issues. We want you to acknowledge the pre-existing gatekeepers. We want you to, think of representation as an end goal. And unfortunately, when I said that quote, that was a very short-lived experience of being popular. I think at the end of the day, no matter how nice I am or how many jokes I tell, it's really my politics that threaten people. And coming to terms with that has been a difficult journey for me, but my politics haven't shifted. And if anything, it just goes to show that sometimes we do things that are popular and sometimes we do things that are unpopular. But if we are trying to, do things to be likable, then I don't think we're ever going to create a sort of political statement that's going to create positive change.
Well, hooray for you. I mean, hold on to your being unpopular. Hold on to your because since you have demonstrated all on your own without any help from anybody, the brilliance of an idea. And the idea, lit fires in people's hearts everywhere, and people came forth to participate in that idea. So now the establishment comes in lots of different forms, as I'm sure you know, but now it wants to co-opt you. Now you're a threat, and so you need to be either co-opted or opposed or I mean, they'll come for you. But it's possible.
Yeah, you certainly have.
Yeah, but it's possible to live your whole life with them coming for you and even get used to it. And you know what? Here's the good part: is that the people who are really the real people who you want to know and who you want on your side will find their way to you, and vice versa. Just because of who you are and what you're doing. Now, what are you doing next? Where do you fit into all of this? Are you exhausted? Do you just want to sleep for 10 weeks?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I really relate to what you just said, because people certainly have come for me over and over and over again for different things. And I found what you said to be so true, is that at the end of the day, I have not lost one person or one thing that wasn't already not on my side. And so it's kind of this cleansing process, and it's getting rid of all of these people that only want to be around you because they have something to gain, and really realizing that the people that are still by my side aren't here because it's popular or it's fun or it's easy. They're here because they care about me and they care about the work that we're doing. Yeah. And so I think that's important to remember as I do continue, and as life continues to be so exhausting, is just being really grounded in knowing who my people are and who my community is. It's a really shielding thing. Otherwise, I think I really would have, taken a nap for 10 weeks.
Yeah. What do you think the future of hashtag Not Your Asian Sidekick is? Do you see it, or are you letting it happen just organically?
I think I'm letting it happen, but I think I'm letting it shift mediums. So that whole thought process is taking different forms now. I think what's cool is that a lot of college students are reaching out to me, bringing me on campus, and really thinking about different ways to organize with Asian Americans. When I was in college, all I was ever asked to do was to set egg rolls and do workshops on microaggressions and to dance in the Asian American Cultural Month dance show. And I started asking, am I only here to be this tool for cultural enrichment? Am I only here as a source of entertainment? What about the pain that isn't consumable? What about the parts of me that aren't as marketable or as fun to interact with? What about what I'm really angry about racism? And it's been awesome to connect with these other angry Asian women and feminist children in college campuses that are no, we reject selling egg rolls in front of the Asian American Cultural Center. We want to talk about racial justice. We want to talk about police brutality. And we want to talk about mass incarceration. And we want to organize with non-Asian people of color. I think that people forget that these hashtags are tools for raising consciousness.
Yes.
And that before any big social movement has happened, there has been a shift in historical consciousness. And so thinking of the hashtag as a kind of shift has been awesome, because in these different geographic locations, I really see that people are politicized in a different way. And so that's really touching for me.
Oh, wow. Bravissima. And thank you also for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. I hope you come back and as this progresses and talk with us again.
I would love to, and thanks so much for having me.
We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And a question. Have you ever been just desperate for the right quotation, preferably from a woman? Well, stick around.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back. Among the many books by Rosalie Maggio is the new Beacon Book of Quotations by Women. That came out in 1998. Talking About People, A Guide to Fair and Accurate Language, came out in 97. The Bias-Free Word Finder, a dictionary of non-discriminatory language. And How to Say It, choice words, phrases, sentence, and paragraphs for every situation. And then the How to Say It style guide. And so it goes. Rosalie Maggio is a word woman. Welcome, Rosalie, to Women's Media Center Live.
Hi, Robin. This is fun.
Well, it is fun. I mean, I was planning on having you later in the year anyway, where we will have to get you back when Unspinning the Spin, that long title, Unspinning the Spin, the Women's Media Center Guide to Fair and Accurate Language, How to Say What You Mean and Decode the Hype, by, ta-da, Rosalie Maggio, the great wordsmith. When that comes out later this year, because of course we've been working with you on that all this time, but in the meanwhile, you came out with something amazing. I mean, this is on top of books that you published: the New Beacon Book of Quotations by Women, Bias-Free Word Finder, Talking About People. Just, you are the consummate wordsmith, and you and I know what consummate means, so there you go. But the other, just about a month or so ago, you sent out this mailing that it was now ready for its debut, quotationsbywomen.com, quotationsbywomen.com, over 40,000 quotes by topic, by author, by keyword, and they are just fantastic. It is such a resource. Thank you.
I'm so glad you like it. I love it myself. Women's words are the most fun I have. You know, Zora Neale Hurston once described folklore, because she was an actual ethnologist and so on, and she said folklore is the boiled down juice or pot liquor of human living. And I always thought that's what quotations are kind of for us.
They are. They're like tanka or haiku or tweets now, but better. I mean, and you have such an ear. You have distilled them. How did this come to be? Just out of your years of work with quotations and with women?
Yes, and well, a couple of years ago, I realized I was sitting on a resource that it was just almost, it was wrong to be sitting on it when people didn't have access to it because it was on my computer. And I looked around, I raised a finger to the prevailing winds and saw that basically it's the internet. If someone wants some reference information, they're going to go there. They're not going to dig out a big book, especially if it has 40,000 quotations in it.
That's right.
So I went to the internet to do it, and it came out of, I'm one of the oldest of 8 children, and fairness was a big deal to us growing up. You really wanted to be sure your piece of the pie was equal to everybody else. And when I first noticed the incredible disparity, as in, you know, just take it all across everything there is in the world, where women are underrepresented and badly so, it was just, I just couldn't stand it. And I'm working for, I'd like men and women to be quoted equally, or, you know, pretty much really equally, and it's just nowhere near that. And some of us, Elaine Partnow was on your show.
Yes.
Was the first, in 1977, she started publishing quotations by women, the quotable woman.
Mm-hmm.
So she was the first, and she got, well, you just have to keep working. We've learned that. You don't just say, well, that's done now. People will pay attention to women. You don't.
No.
You know, it's incredible that ahistoricity, I love that word because I noticed it in my work over and over again. Women would disappear. There'd be a blip on the screen during their lifetime, and then after they're dead, whoops, where'd she go?
That's right.
That's why I like your show, by the way, because it's a living record, and nobody can take it away now.
Thank you.
The way they have. But I would like to explain. For example, people asked me if the quotes I collected, I've had a couple of books published of women's quotes, and really, a guy said to me, I'm sure he wanted to hurt me, but he said, now, are these the quotes that weren't good enough to get in the regular books?
Oh, my God. Oh, you know, sometimes they're amazing. I mean, sometimes I think they're from another planet. I know they're not because I gave birth to one on this planet. But they're, and you know, and he turned out pretty good. But I swear to God, sometimes they're absolutely amazing. Well, the thing about what you've collected is not only the content of it, but the breadth and the width and the depth and the famous people and the not so famous people and the not at all famous people who have said amazing things, but also the ease with which one can find something. I mean, you have totally covered the waterfront. If I want to go in and see what has been said by women down through the ages about cats, for example, I can do that. or if I want to go in with a particular author in mind or a particular activist or whatever, I can go in with a name. Or if I want in other words, topic, keyword, author, all these easy ways of cross-referencing. And it's such a rich trove. How long did it take you to do this? Years.
Well, I've been collecting, yes, for 24 years probably, or 25 years around there. And then the last 2 years I was working about 10 hours a day on it because I wanted the website, in order for it to be so usable and so quick and easy, the back end had to be murder. And
of course.
So each little piece of information goes in separately and is checked. And one thing I like about it is all the sources. You know, it's a funny thing. If a man says something, we assume, oh yeah, he said that. If a woman says something, I wonder if she really said that. I wonder if she said that. It's about, credibility. And so I thought the more sources, so most of the quotations have sources, and I've seen those with my own eyes, because accuracy also, you make a mistake and it throws doubt on everything.
Oh,
and
yes,
so,
and they leap on it. That's right. No, we have to be triply perfect because we can't afford. Yeah.
Yes.
And the freedom to fail is an important freedom that women just don't have.
Isn't that the truth? Well, and another man wrote me, I think it's emblematic of the whole quotation thing. He said to me, well, he actually started his letter that said, "Esteemed Ms. Maggio," and you always know that those letters are going to reek. But anyway, he said that the reason I was complaining about women not being, there's so few quotations by women, he said, did it ever occur to you that, quote, women have never said, written, or uttered anything worth quoting? Mm-hmm. Now, he put that in writing, the poor fellow, and he was a victim of redundancy there with, but he also victim of circular thinking. The reason we think women have never been said anything is because they haven't been quoted.
Yes, exactly.
And so, when Elaine and I started, earlier than she actually counted the quotations in the Bartlett's familiar quotations, which has been referred to as the Bible of quotations. And it is, you say quotations, and
you think of Bartlett, right?
There were, in 1980, she published this in 70, and she had actually gone and counted 1/2 of 1% of the quotations in the Bartletts were by women.
Sure.
1/2 of 1%, that's 99.5% by men. And the thing is, when they did include women, for example, in that edition, we had Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Now, That's nice to know that women did that, right?
Yeah, but give me a break.
When you only have 1/2 of 1%, could we say something about war? War or something big. They used to quote women on quarrels, but not war, on thrift, let's say, but not economics.
Yep.
On prayer, but not theology. I mean, we always got the light stuff.
And always, always, always on crafts, but not art.
There you go. That's the pattern.
Yep.
In the 14th edition of Bartlett's, Charles Dickens is credited with the expression, "Before a man can say Jack Robinson." Okay, but there's a footnote that says that the Jack Robinson thing appeared in Fanny Burney's book in 1778 and in Maria Edgeworth's The Absentee Landlord in 1812. Now, both of those predate Dickens
exactly
by years. They're in a footnote. The two of them bundled together in a footnote, and then later editions don't even include it. So, it's from footnote to oblivion.
We quote Dickens and not the woman who said it first. Yeah,
Anyway, this is a pattern that I can say is repeated over and over and over again. So, yes, getting women, and what's sad is I have all these quotes. It's just a huge site, and I have pages, 30 pages of names of women that aren't even on there, single spaced.
Wow.
That I want to do.
You mean that you mean that you're going to be adding to it as well?
That I hope, yes.
So it's a living site. See, this is just so valuable. Honest to God, Rosalie, it's a real service to scholars, to writers, to anybody who loves language, to anybody who just loves good quotes, because they're like a chocolate box. I mean, I start.
They're just. Yeah,
and they can't have it both ways. Well, actually, they try to, the boys, by saying on the one hand that women never said anything worth quoting, and on the other hand saying, oh, you know how women will talk all the time. So, I mean, either if we're chatterboxes, the message being, yes, we're chatterboxes, but we say nothing of worth. That's where the erasure comes in over worth and value. And so this talk about something being up there forever. This will outlast Bartlett. Your
well,
site.
I'm hoping it will act like a wiki where people are already sending me, they're saying, oh, what about this? And they're correcting mistakes, let's say, or adding, not yet the mistakes, but they'll be coming. And over in the next 10 years, if people will, send their stuff and I keep reading, it will be a huge, because it's an overview of women's lives and, what they've said. I'm excited about its possibility of growing.
And it spans centuries, too. It spans, what's the earliest one? Do you remember approximately?
Oh, BCE, before the Common Era, back... I'm trying to think. No, good question. I'll look that up for the next time somebody asks me.
You probably have Sappho in there or somebody.
Oh, absolutely, Sappho.
Yeah.
Oh, no, absolutely. Lots by her. And here's the thing. Other quotation books, they'll even quote the big ones like Virginia Woolf or Willa Cather and Zora Neale Hurston, but only a few of theirs. And you say, wait a minute, did you actually read all their stuff?
Yes.
And the other thing I like is what you mentioned earlier. I have children in there, mystery writers, articles, because I don't, it isn't an elitist thing, and all over the world. Oh, I found such fresh writing coming out of Africa.
Yes.
What I could, because always on the margins there's just freshness.
No, this shines a light on the things that we just haven't heard or read before, as well as those we've heard hinted at. And it's what we need. It's like food for the soul. It really is.
Oh,
we've got to go. Time goes so fast. I'm so sorry.
Yes, it is so much fun. Thanks, Robin.
Oh, Rosalie, thank you. Remember, listeners, give yourself a treat. It's called quotationsbywomen.com. Easy enough to remember. And if you Google that, we'll come up with it. If you forget, you just Google quotations by women or Rosalie Maggio. It will lead you to the same golden trove of quotes, but it's the place itself is quotationsbywomen.com. Thank you so much. And we will talk later this year when Unspinning the Spin comes out. 2 triumphs in 1 year.
Very fun. All right, Robin, have a good day and thanks.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. The Florida Alliance for Retired Americans, FLARA, has issued a new report called Florida, A State of Embarrassment. This is Floridians themselves talking. And I don't mean to offend any Floridians by sharing this with you, because in fact I was born in Florida, although it's true I looked around and within moments said, oh, I have to get out of here and go to New York. Anyway, it's called 10 Reasons You Should Not Move to Florida from Floridians Who Know. The actual report is called Florida, A State of Embarrassment. These are the 10 reasons. 1, it's ground zero for health care fraud, up to $80 billion a year, the problem. 2, the most identity theft in the nation. 3, more shady crimes there. The 6th highest violent crime rate in the country, murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, and also the nation's highest level of public corruption convictions. 4, second most regressive taxes in the United States. 5, third widest rich-poor gap in the United States. 6, tremendous unmet job creation needs. It's a dismal place to look for work. The third highest proportion on unemployed persons jobless for 6 months or more. 7, state spending on education is at rock bottom. 8, state spending for social welfare is also very bad. 9, Florida leads the United States in home foreclosures, and it's second in underwater mortgages. Now, that does not mean literally you know what I mean. But in Florida, with the hurricanes, you're not sure. It could be the homes as well as the mortgage. 9, that was 9. 10, these realities should deter people from moving to Florida. That was the report's conclusion. I would add in a couple of other little tidbits. 5-hour voting lines in poor or black neighborhoods. Plus, of course, let us never forget the refusal to recount and to elect Gore in 2000, which would have given us a very different country right now, one that had never been through Iraq, neither then nor now. It's time for another quick break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and when we return, we'll be speaking with Megan Marshall, who just won the 2014 Pulitzer Prize for biography. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back. Megan Marshall just won the 2014 Pulitzer Prize in biography for her work on Margaret Fuller. She also is the author of The Peabody Sisters, which won many prizes and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in biography and memoir categories. Her essays and reviews have appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times Book Review, The Atlantic, and Slate, and she teaches at Emerson College. Here is Megan Marshall. Welcome, Megan, to Women's Media Center Live. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Robin. It's a great honor.
Well, congratulations over the Pulitzer. This is wonderful. You were shortlisted for the Pulitzer with the last book, which you had me at hello. You had me at the Peabody Sisters. That last book was wonderful, and you were a finalist then. And this time, Margaret Fuller, A New American Life, won the 2014 Pulitzer for biography. So congratulations.
Thanks very much. Yes, she prevailed. And, since I'm interested in history, I looked back over the course of the prizes. It's about a 100-year history, and I found out that only 5 books that were with a female subject written by a woman had won the prize in this 100-year history, starting with a biography of Julia Ward Howe in 1917, written by her daughters, and ending now with Margaret Fuller. Those are the only 2 biographies of strongly feminist women that have won the prize, and I feel really, I feel like this prize is for Margaret Fuller. She should have had one as a journalist if they existed when she was writing in the 1840s, and she got me here.
Well, you also got her here. Well, yeah. Let's talk about this wonderful book and Margaret Fuller. I'm so grateful for this book because I discovered about, 30, 40 years ago, Margaret Fuller, when I was first reading The Suffragists and The Transcendentalists, and I just fell in love with her. But there certainly wasn't a biography like this, where she came alive. I mean, but somebody who was the editor of The Dial, which for the listeners who don't know, was the Transcendentalist literary journal and was the foremost literary journal in the country, and she edited. Oh my God, she edited Thoreau and Emerson, and she was the first war correspondent who was a woman, and she was a feminist writer. I mean, this was an amazing titanic figure, and
Yes, she was, it's hard even for me now, having studied her life so closely, to explain it. There's no explaining Margaret Fuller. She was, as you say, a titanic force. But she was a brilliant mind, and her father, who was a lawyer and politician, educated her himself as if she were a boy, as if he were preparing her for college, which, of course, women couldn't go to college in those days. She was born in 1810 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and grew up in a very intellectually alive community. And then he died when she was about 25, leaving her to take care of 6 younger siblings and her widowed mother, and this thrust her into the position of having to support herself and the family, and a life that might have been more one of leisure and of kind of, she at that point thought she was going to write a biography of Goethe, who was her great hero, turned into one of scrambling to make a buck while still using her wit. So then that makes us all the more impressive. So she had by then, or around that time, befriended Emerson, and he saw that she was every bit his equal. And she began teaching in girls' schools, and then had this idea of what she called conversations for women, adult women who didn't have the opportunity of college education and hadn't had the kind of classical education that her father had given her, although they were all bright, questing women themselves.
You're the first biographer to discover the conversations, aren't you?
Well, they've been written about it before, but in my research for the Peabody sisters, I came across a transcript of these conversations, the first series of them that was kept by Elizabeth Peabody, who was attending and who helped Margaret organize the classes. And that is really an extraordinary document where you just hear these women talking.
Wow.
Margaret Fuller, her big idea was to get women to converse, to speak, to dispute, to argue, to present logical cases for whatever it is they may be trying to present, and they began talking about Greek and Roman goddesses as a kind of empowering subject, but pretty soon they got to talking about inspiration and duty, and finally, what is a woman to do? What are we to do with our talents? And you feel like you're there in the room with them as they're talking about, what should single women do? That was a whole new situation. There were, because of economics, there were many more single women in the Northeast than there were single men, and a phenomenon I think we experience today. And no longer did these women want to just hang around in their parents' houses or be the helpmeet in a sibling's household as a maiden aunt. So what could women do? And that was what she was asking, and these women were asking. And since you mentioned the Dial, extraordinary that these mostly men in the Transcendentalist group would turn to a woman to edit it. But she also, printed her some of the women who were in these conversations, their writings about women's rights, their poetry, and made this Dial so much more than it would have been had it been edited by one of these disaffected ministers.
The conversations are it's like eavesdropping on a 19th century, consciousness raising group of amazing women who were suffragists and whom we've read about and heard about our whole lives. It's juicy.
Yes. Then there was one session that kind of backfired, where the men got sort of jealous of what's going on here, and
there
they
you
wanted
go.
to come too, and that also has been recorded. So that's one of the funnier chapters of the book.
I think she could walk into a room today and sit down and give better than she got, not just as good as.
She was really ahead of her time in ways that it's again kind of impossible to imagine. I think she was openly ambitious. I'm determined on distinction, she was saying at age 15, but she also wanted to, didn't want to be alienated from her femininity, and she began to develop this whole theory of a kind of interweaving, something that we find very, sympathetic today. I mean, she says people think that male and female represent the two sides of the great radical dualism, but in fact they are perpetually passing into one another.
And her manifesto, Woman in the 19th Century, could in many parts be Woman in the 21st Century.
Exactly. Yeah, she was very much trying to theorize gender, I think.
Yes.
That's not the word she would have used then, and it's very sophisticated, and she's quite a critic of marriage and the ways in which she felt that for too many women felt that and in fact society forced this on them, that the choice of who they married was really a choice of who they were going to be for life. And
that's right.
She wanted marriage to be just simply an experience for women the way it was for men.
Right.
And she outlined a whole series of what she thought were positive kinds of marriages to have: a more companionate marriage, more spiritually seeking marriages in which the couples might be searching together. But other than that, she considered marriage a corrupt social contract, and lived that out herself.
Yes, she
later.
did. Two last things that I want to ask you while we still have time. One, say a few words about her tragic death, because
yes, well, She had talked. She was writing for the New York Tribune with under Horace Greeley. She left New England to do that, and then persuaded him to send her to Europe as a foreign correspondent, where she landed in 1848 during the Great Revolutions there and settled in Rome. She fell in love with a much younger a soldier in the Civic Guard who became part of the revolution, and she was covering the revolution. She became pregnant, had their child in secret, and there was a brief period when all seemed well. There was a Roman Republic was established, and she imagined that they could stay on there and be part of a new democracy, a new unified Italy. But the Republic fell, and she and Giovanni, her lover, now to whom she, I think, was then finally married, and their son, 2-year-old son, Nino, had to travel back to America by a cargo ship. They didn't have the money for the fancy Cunard line, and this ship went down in a terrible storm just off Fire Island, about 300 yards offshore in the middle of the night, and they all drowned.
Yeah.
Terrible. She was only 40 years old and had accomplished an enormous amount.
I know. It's so tragic. Well, to end on a happier note, my last question, I realize I've come to the source I can ask this. It's ancillary but related, because all of these amazing people knew each other. Whitman read her, Poe reviewed her, and when she went abroad, she stayed with the home of Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning. It just makes me drool when I think of the conversations. The youngest daughter of the Peabody Great Three, Sophia, wasn't she married to Hawthorne?
Yes, Sophia.
Sophia, okay.
She was married to Nathaniel Hawthorne.
This explains why he had such good consciousness about women. And I read somewhere, but now I can actually check it with you, that they spent their honeymoon staying with Barrett and Browning in Italy, and that later on, when they had a daughter, I think eventually she wound up as a nun, chose to be a nun, but she studied music abroad with Clara Schumann. Well, it wasn't their honeymoon when they were in Italy, but it was later in their lives as a whole family with 3 kids. They were quite good friends with the Brownings in Florence, as you know, a few years after Margaret Fuller had been living in Florence. Right.
And befriending the Brownings too. So I think I'm so glad that you say that about Hawthorne, because he's often put down as he has this famous quotation about the damned mob of scribbling women who were eating into his profits. But the women that he created, the characters are all derived from these very strong women who were in his life from childhood on, and Margaret Fuller was an influence, and his wife Sophia, and all the Peabody sisters, really. So thanks for speaking up for Hawthorne as a feminist.
Well, I love Hawthorne, and as a writer, he got cranky because anybody, as you say, was cutting into his terrain. But his characters, you're absolutely right. Nobody was writing like that, and I think he once said to Melville, that you're stopping yourself from being a great writer because there are no women in your world.
Well, if he didn't say it, he should have.
There you go. Thank you, Megan, for this book, for the Peabody sisters as well, but especially right now for Margaret Fuller, A New American Life. Please, listeners, get it, buy it, read it, enjoy, revel in it, and thank you, and go on and write lots more Pulitzers to be won.
Thank you, Robin.
And now it's time for some news you can use. Well, you'll actually be able to use it in September, but maybe you're the kind of woman who likes to plan ahead, and I'll remind you of this when we get closer to September, too. Led by the group We Are Woman and the ERA Action Group, women from across the land and men of conscience will converge on Washington, D.C. on Friday, September 12th for a day of action, lobbying legislators, etc., followed by a rally on Saturday, September 13th on the West Lawn of the Capitol. And there will be songs by all-female bands, and there'll be great speeches and inspiration and good stuff. So go to www.wearewoman.com for all the info you'll need to plan to sign up to stand up for equality, voter rights, and equal protection under the law for everybody. And it's time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still Robin Morgan, who will be back in just a minute with Fighting Words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back again. And we are ready for Fighting Words. Word came at the end of June that Japan had finally outlawed possession of child pornography. Most other countries, developed countries, in groups that Japan also was a member of, like Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, most of those countries had outlawed child porn for a long time ago. So Japan was often the only member of such coalitions that still permitted this. But the story behind the story is that the new law leaves untouched the popular and sexually explicit manga comics, as well as other portrayals of young girls, children even, as objects of sexual pleasure and desire. There's an exemption in the new law for the popular comics, the manga, which are read by adults all over the place, and also exemptions for Japan's anime, animated cartoons, both a concession to the nation's powerful publishing and entertainment industries, which are run by the Yakuza, or the gangster underground. The law also leaves untouched a whole gray area in which young girls are depicted in highly sexually suggestive manners. This is everything from images of all-girl bands, of pop music posing in lingerie and bikinis and very short skirt school uniforms with cleavage, to fantasy illustrations with the faces of prepubescent girls, children, pasted atop the scantily clad bodies of voluptuous adults. The fascination with the sexuality of young girls, which is very popular in the country, in Japan, has its own name in Japanese, Rorikon. Rorikon stands for the Lolita complex, and it's on prominent display in the shopping district, in manga-derived posters, in shirts, in bags, and even small plastic dolls of young girls with exaggerated hourglass figures. The new law on child porn is partly due to a real push by the Japanese police, who said that the failure to outlaw possession before had created such continuing demand that the number of criminal cases involving production and circulation of child porn had skyrocketed. But the police efforts on legislation were blocked by the nation's publishing houses, which feared that manga, including, by the way, depictions of naked or nearly naked girl children, sometimes engaged in explicit sexual acts, they were afraid it would be included in the ban. And so the popularity of manga comics has mitigated the decline of the publishing industry, and they claimed it would be a national economic disaster. Political leaders explain the exemption for manga by saying the depictions, wait for this one, are imaginary and do not victimize actual children. And also, they said they opposed, wait for it, here it is, curtailing artistic expression. Now, as an artist, I can tell you that that's always in serious danger, but this is not one of those cases. The ban did not include other less well-defined areas, such as the popular genre of, quote, junior idols, 12 and 13-year-old girls, photographed in sexually suggestive poses for magazines. It makes you wonder what was included in the definition of child porn. That's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS Radio WJFK 1580 AM, or you've been visiting us at WMCLive.com for this and for a whole rich archive of every one of our previous episodes. Be sure to find us on Facebook, Twitter, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to WMC Live's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton. Senior Producer, Crystal Williams Chancellor. And our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thank you for being with us. Join us next week when a special 2-segment roundtable with Libya's leading feminists will help us decipher what is going on there, from Benghazi right up to today's headlines. We'll also talk with a woman organizing women's internet tech startup companies. And we'll meet a woman who's speaking up for making women who become mothers in midlife visible and proud. Only here at Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.